Kind of a interesting side note, Ukraine's military aid, they're talking about these packages and stuff, but and I know you mentioned that Russia's GDP isn't as high, but apparently, I guess their fossil fuels revenue has doubled compared to 2021, and we're
Yeah.
only a quarter of the way, or a little bit more than a third of the way into the year.
Well, yeah, that's quarter over quarter, so it's just like a
Okay, okay,
trend.
gotcha.
But it's yeah, they're making a lot more. So chaos. It's it's just they're having the cash finally come in after years of lean time to actually fund all this stuff. And their economy is not as big as the U.S., but that's a lot of stuff that you can buy. They've got a pretty big military industry there, and it's I you know I don't see I, I don't see the financial sanctions especially really hurting them like people expected it to, and that's really backfired. I would say like it's that has kind of thrown the whole world in chaos.
In what way?
Um, just well, I think there's like so Ukraine's bad, right? The whole situation's going there, but the financial sanctions were basically billed as a nuclear option, and they definitely have had bad effects on um, the country. But it's really, I would say, hit more normal people. Um, I think it was meant to probably their mindset was if we hurt enough people like normal people, then they'll find a way to throw them out. And I don't really think that's happened. The ruble itself crashed dramatically and relative to other currencies, and that's above strength wise where it was before.
Hmm.
And I've I think Russia's talking about backing their currency to gold and commodities too, which would be an interesting switch uh, compared to Western countries very fiat based. That's just based on the full faith and credit of the United States. But you know, I really I really think that the bigger effects of all of this has been to lessen the power that the U.S. financial system has globally, and you see a lot of people. Russia is forcing people to pay in commodities in rubles now. Uh, that's been a big transition. So you're kind of seeing basically the acceleration of the de-dollarization as the global reserve currency, which we'll see what happens. But probably our most important export over the last 30 years has been the dollar.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, like I think the Saudis are starting to trade with other people and global currencies, but we'll see what happens. You've got the people saying that it's not really going to matter. The U.S. is kind of like on this long-term trend where they're gradually getting replaced, and then you also have by the yuan or whatever some more stable global currencies that are backed by physical assets
Mm-hmm.
that have physical value, um, or just the Chinese economy growing as more of a into that more consumption based economy that the U.S. had after the 40s and 50s. It's we'll see what happens, but then on the other side you have the doomsayers that say that America's time is done and we're going to have a full blown liquidity financial crisis and things are going to hit the fan real quickly. So um, I I I believe that the sanctions they felt were going to have a bigger effect than they did. And there's a lot of these things where they're like going out and taking oligarchs' boats and stuff like that. And you're like, well, they're going to sell it. Maybe it's worth 500 or 700 million dollars, and then use the proceeds to give to Ukraine or whatever. But I'm sure that's going to mean a lot to them. But it's just, it feels like it's more for appearance's sake.
Yeah, I mean that just sounds like a slap on the hand more so than anything like gut wrenching. Like, oh wow, you suck.
Yeah. So it's, yeah, I I don't really know. Like it. Um,
So, who's buying? I think we mentioned before. Is it India that's been buying a lot more of the fossil fuel from Russia?
well, India was basically the first, I would say, really close Western aligned country
Okay,
to say that they're not going to essentially crash their economy and follow along with these Western sanctions, and they'll just
okay,
start trading in ruble or rupees, and then I guess rubles now. So they, it's, I think it was naive to think that, and maybe this is kind of more related to domestic politics these days, like with cancel culture and stuff. I
hmm
think there was some naive thinking that the whole world would basically cancel Russia because it's,
Is
you
that
know,
is
it,
that what the feeling was?
well, I just, it was, the US definitely pushed them to stop, most people, countries to do, stop doing business with them. And I'm not saying that's legitimate or illegitimate,
Right.
but most of these countries are reliant on Russian energy. So if you're,
Okay. Sorry, I misheard
yeah,
what you were saying. I was thinking you were talking like a bunch of people on Twitter were trying to cancel Russia, and I'm like, seriously, they thought that's going to make Russia stop?
well, no, I'm
Oh,
just saying
yeah.
more
No,
like political
I don't.
class.
Yeah, it makes when you explained it, I'm like, okay, that makes more sense. But in my mind, I was thinking, like, Russia's bad, let's cancel Russia. And I'm like
Yeah.
thinking, and Putin's like, what? This American says that I'm bad. I need to stop now.
Well, and it's like it,
But
like the US kind of did that on the financial sanctions, because they're basically like, you can't do business through US financial intermediaries
okay,
um, with them anymore. But there's a like I think it's a chip system in China. They're and they just put deposits in different banks, so they're like, it's pretty easy to get around.
right.
And I think it was naive to think that it would turn out how they thought it would.
Yeah, there's a episode of Bones. I was never a big watcher of Bones, but I watched one particular episode for some reason. I think I was at my parents' house and it just happened to be on. That would actually make the most sense of why I would ever watch Bones. But a serial killer or something, or a person charged with serial crimes or something. Anyway, the lady's talking about how she wants to make sure that justice is served and everything. And this friend of Bones is like, "Oh, it's so great to think that you don't believe in the death penalty and stuff." And Bones turned around and was like, "No, no, I believe in the death penalty. I think there's just some people that are evil, and there's no way that you can reconcile that. You can't buy them off. You can't bribe them. There's not a way. They're just evil, and there has to be something. There has to be a consequence to it." And I think America sometimes buys into our own feel good system. Like everybody wants
Yeah.
happiness. Everybody wants, um, if Maslow's hierarchy, if we just provide these things, obviously everybody's just going to want to, like, we'll have a sit down session. It's like, hey, Russia, I feel that you've been a little bit much of a bully lately. And Russia's like, oh, I feel your feelings. I think when you deal with people, I do believe that there's some people that are definitely predispositioned to doing, or, well, I mean, a sociopath is what I would normally call it, or a psychopath, but there's some people that it doesn't matter. They're going to do what they think they need to do, regardless of the goodness or the badness, the rightness or the wrongness of it.
Well, the power dynamics have definitely changed,
Yeah.
and it's. Uh, I feel like some people aren't respecting that, and it's just like when it comes to the end of the day, these politicians are power because people vote and they elect them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to see energy prices, for instance, increase by 50% double, and that's a precarious situation for any politician, any administration maintaining power long term. So, India has China in its backyard, and for them specifically, they've got a lot of people. Like I think we talked in the past about China's focused on feeding their people,
Mm-hmm.
and you got a billion mouths to feed. Same with India, and they're not going to go feast or famine on this. And
Especially when they don't have to. Yeah.
yeah, so it's a tough situation. Like there's obviously some good stuff with getting the Western countries, which have been really misaligned in recent years, together and coordinating together again. But I don't know. I don't think they have yet. But the EU is talking about banning all Russian oil imports.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that, like how that relates to the fossil fuel revenue doubling. But that means that they can't bring in oil, right? Imports.
Yeah, so that
Okay.
they would make it illegal to basically, and I don't know. That probably doesn't relate to gas too, but I mean, people fundamentally are pissed off. It affects their normal everyday life, and I think it's like I watched Biden speaking on Ukraine a while back, and he was like, well, we're just going to have to deal with higher prices to support Ukraine, and it's most people in the U.S. don't know about Ukraine or really probably give a crap about what's going on. They kind of feel like it's just another country. We're always in a war somewhere, and
Yeah.
they see that gas prices are way up, food prices are way up, and there's a lot of people barely getting by in the U.S., and um,
Well,
that's real effect on your home.
yeah. Well, and then you add on top of that, and I mean, I mentioned this kind of as a joke earlier about distractions, but legitimately, the opening weekend for Doctor Strange has now broken any other opening weekend in movie history. It Spider-Man's No Way Home in December was the previous one, and Doctor Strange has already broken all those records.
Yeah,
And so, despite gas and food going up, despite all this stuff, people still went. In the United States alone, we're not even talking about the rest of the world.
yeah,
Broke the record for how much money was spent on this movie to be seen. And so, I think you're right. We don't have a real idea of what's actually going on, and I know we'll try to stay apolitical as much as possible because we're trying to talk more about facts and how this affects the world. But both Trump and Biden, their history with Ukraine, especially over the past 4 or 5 years, 6 years, I wonder how much that plays a part into the average American's callousness to the situation in Ukraine, because the Democrats were saying one thing about how Trump was involved with Ukraine, and then you had the Republicans saying this is how Biden was involved with Ukraine, and that was one of the things. I think that was the main cause for the first impeachment of Trump. So it became very political very quickly,
which ended up being bullshit, which is unfortunate.
I And
most politics seems to be basically BS.
yeah, I
Just
I don't disagree necessarily. I just think it's sad that because of that, we kind of like COVID, we politicize something
yeah, totally.
instead of actually just trying to look at like trying to see what's best for the nation. And it's no wonder that even in the midst of a pandemic that there's been world records broken on movies
Yeah,
because and in the midst of at least the rumblings of a world war, that some of these things that you just would think that wouldn't happen,
yeah,
our energy usage and stuff has gone up so much. And I'm not talking about just because we were stayed at home. Like right now, the energy usage has gone up. You know, there's more and more TikTok and TikTok companies that are copying them. You know, Facebook is using even more metaverse type stuff to control the internet world. And for the most part, people don't give a flip about Ukraine. There are some, but for the most part, we still don't see how that affects us other than, as you said, our gas prices are going up or some of our other costs are going up.
well, I
And
oh god.
no, yeah, yeah, I was saying and as an improper end of a sentence.
Well, I think to your point, it's the people don't care or they really care, and the Ukraine sort of thing was trading jabs, so to
Mm-hmm.
speak, on either side. Politics really has seemed to become more of a sport than trying to actually get solutions to it. Like some of the bills that I see put out recently, or just in general these days, are so extreme they'll never get passed. But it kind of seems to be put out there so people could be like, well, we tried, and look at these people, they voted against it, you know, they're evil, whether it's whatever party it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just it's become so ineffective, and I would say entertainment based on a lot of stuff.
Right.
And there's just a lot of serious stuff that I think people want, both parties want it to be dealt with, but aren't being talked about in a constructive manner.
Yeah. And I think there's another undercurrent going on right now. And this is what from what I've read, I can't, obviously, I wasn't there in the teens or the 40s of the 1900s, but there's an undercurrent of what makes a person that is really strongly going on because we're still dealing, specifically in the United States, but not limited. In fact, most European countries are dealing with what does it mean to be a part of our country?
Yeah.
And France in particular, though Britain has this as well, is if you weren't born in France and you're not a couple generations old in France, then you're not actually French.
Yeah.
And they care less about the religion than they do about your birthright. And you know, we're having our stuff going on over here with the different race type stuff or the gender type stuff, and other countries aren't anywhere close to where we are progressively. There are some that are definitely more progressive than we are. I don't want to say like there's nobody out there, but we're still fighting these fights that we were fighting after World War II, and some of the things that we did during World War II to try that we're trying to kind of make up for with like Japanese internment camps and stuff. And we're still dealing with these issues of what makes a person, what makes an American American. And I think sometimes we get isolated because these past two elections, the midterm and the presidential election and the midterm, there are a lot of interesting choices that were made by the people in the United States, and we become very blinders. We've had a lot of blinders on just looking at how we're dealing with it, forgetting that other countries still treat these same issues the way that we stereotypically would say the South treats a black man coming into a white woman's home kind of thing. And we have a stereotype and we're like, well, that's changing. But there's other countries where it's still that kind of thing, whatever their black man and their white woman type situations are very serious. Like those are things that could get you shot in these pacifist countries, you know? So it's an undercurrent that's going on, and Russia has taken so many different political statements about these over Putin's term that I think the ones who are yelling the loudest, I won't say necessarily the ones that care the most, but the ones that are yelling the loudest about Ukraine being mistreated by Russia and stuff, are a lot of these people who Putin has specifically spoken out against, or has gelled, or has said you're not really a part of what it means to be Russia, to be
Yeah.
Russian. Um, and I know because there's a lot of gender stuff, there's um, a lot of race stuff that is anti-Russia right now, and they're the ones screaming the loudest. But it's not the senators, it's not the businessmen that I hear making statements. You know, you don't hear, and I'm going to say a name, and then you're like, well, actually, that person did. I don't keep up with the businessmen. They haven't made such a thing where it's made it through my news feeds, but I haven't heard Warren Buffett or Bill Gates. And you're going to be like, well, actually, I know you're going to do that. Which one was it, or was it both of them
What?
that spoke up against Russia?
Oh, I don't know. It
Okay,
probably
good.
wasn't Warren Buffett.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one of these things of, you know, I haven't heard Papa John talk up against, you know, NFL owners or whoever, the people that you usually hear on some of this stuff. And which makes me think that if we do avoid a World War III, it's definitely going to be very interesting politics going forward, which obviously will affect the finance and energy world as well.
Yeah.